Now, just to kind of give us a little background here, the first 6 chapters of this book deal mainly with historical things. Okay, so chapter 1 was when those 4 Hebrew children were brought from Jerusalem to Babylon, and they started entering into the court of Nebuchadnezzar, and their character and their stance against some of the things that were going on. Chapter 2, however, was prophetic. It's about this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had about this 4-metal man, which Daniel then interpreted. And then in chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6, all deal with kind of historical things. The fiery furnace, the Daniel in the lion's den, Belshazzar when he was partying with 1,000 of his lords and the Persians came in and defeated Babylon. All of those were historical, first 6 chapters. Now we get into chapter 7, and chapters 7 through 12 are prophetical. They're prophetic chapters. They deal with things that when Daniel saw them, they would happen in the future. Okay, so chapters 1 through 6 historical, chapters 7 through 12 prophetical. Chapters 1 through 6 are written in the third person. So that's, in other words, he, him, they, theirs, that kind of thing. Chapters 7 through 12 all are in the first person. I, me, my. Daniel is speaking about his own visions, his own life. These are the things that God gave to Daniel. And what he's going to be speaking about specifically is prophecies that God gave him concerning the future of Israel, concerning the future of Gentile dominance over Israel, all the way until the second coming of Jesus Christ. And in fact, in a couple weeks' time, we're going to get to Daniel chapter 9, and it is the most incredible prophecy in the entire Bible because it deals with a mathematical prophecy of when Jesus Christ actually rode in to Jerusalem on the donkey on Palm Sunday. A mathematical prophecy that details the very day that he did that. Incredible stuff that we're going to come into. So this is dealing with prophecy. Stuff that would happen after Daniel prophesied it. Okay, so let's look in verse 1. It says, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts." Okay, so we get a historical marker here. In the first year of Belshazzar. Now, a couple chapters ago, we read about Belshazzar. Belshazzar was the great-grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, who was that amazing king of Babylon who came and conquered Israel. And Belshazzar, we said, was left in charge by his father, a man named Nabonidus, who was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. He was left in charge by Nabonidus while Nabonidus went to fight the Persians. And during that time, in chapter 5, it says he was partying with 1,000 of his nobles, and that's when Babylon was defeated. So the year, according to historians, the first year of Belshazzar's reign as king of Babylon was 533 BC. So you've got a historical marker. Boom, you know exactly when this took place. 533 BC. This is when Daniel got this vision. And Daniel now, as I said, because this is not historical, it's prophetical, he's actually going back about 14 years from the previous chapter of Daniel in the lion's den, which we read last time. He's going back about 14 years. Daniel at this point is about 68 years old, and he has this dream, and he sees visions while he's sleeping or he's on his bed. And it's so amazing that he writes down the main facts of what's going on. It just blows him away. So Daniel spoke, verse 2, saying, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea." That would be the Mediterranean. The great sea is, to a Jew, is always the Mediterranean. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. Now, by the way, whenever the Bible, I should say often when the Bible refers to the sea or many waters, it's quite often referring to nations, pagan nations. So just imagine a Jew on the shores of the sea of the Mediterranean Sea, looking out west and thinking about all the Gentile nations that from time to time would sail their ships in there and try to conquer it. So when he's saying the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, it's stirring up the Gentile nations, in a sense. And by the way, what we're going to see is these kingdoms all surround the Mediterranean area that he's going to be having this vision about. Verse 3, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. We'll find out that these beasts are kingdoms. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Okay, so the first beast that came up out of the sea was a lion with eagle's wings. Now what's interesting is that the symbol for Babylon was a lion with eagle's wings. What's the symbol for the UK? Or for England? A lion. What's the symbol for the... What did you say?
A bulldog.
A bulldog.
I've got 2 of those.
What's the symbol for America?
Eagle.
Eagle. Yeah, so every country kind of has a symbolic animal. Now this is... For Babylon, it was a lion with eagle's wings. Now it says about this lion, and by the way, lions are the king of the jungle, right? They're majestic, they're proud, and they're powerful. They're the top of the heap. So was Babylon. It was the most powerful dictatorship up to that time, and probably of all time. Besides the Lord's reign when He comes. But they're majestic, they're proud, they're powerful, they're the king of the jungle. But notice what it says. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Now this speaks of a humbling of this once proud, mighty animal. Now, do you remember what happened as we've been studying through? What happened to Nebuchadnezzar? Do you remember that he was driven from his kingdom and made to dwell like a beast in the field? And it says in that chapter where he was driven out, it says that God would give him the heart of a beast for 7 years. And now it says the wings are going to be plucked off. He's going to be standing up like a man. And he's going to be given a heart of what? Of whom? A man. A heart of a man. Now what I see in this is the humiliation of Nebuchadnezzar. Because here this once proud, mighty man was brought low. And you remember what God said to him in that chapter? I can't remember off the top of my head which one it was. I think it's chapter 4. He said, you will be driven from your kingdom and made to be like a beast of the field until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdoms of men. And he was humbled. And when he was humbled, then God raised him up like a man and gave him the heart of a man. Okay, so we see here another aspect of God just working in the lives of people. And He's working in the lives of even very proud people to bring them low, to bring them under His authority. So that we see here, this is the first beast that has risen up. Look at verse 5. And suddenly another beast, the second like it, like a bear, it says. It was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, arise, devour much flesh. Okay, now the bear. Now a bear is very powerful and big, but it's awkward. Its movements are kind of clumsy, like this. Now this would depict the Medo-Persian Empire. The Medo-Persian Empire was the empire that came after Babylon, and it was much bigger than Babylon, though not as powerful, kind of awkward in the way that it governed itself. Now, it says here that it was raised up on one side. Now, we've got Medo, we've got Persia, the Medians and the Persians. The Persians came a little bit later with this united kingdom, and the Persians were much more powerful. So scholars believe that raised up on one side would refer to Persia being stronger. Okay? And it says there were 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And so scholars look at this and they say, well, that's probably the 3 kingdoms that Medo-Persia conquered when it came to power. And that would be Babylon, Egypt, and Lydia. And Lydia would be modern-day Turkey, Asia Minor in Bible times. So it's got three of these ribs in its teeth. And notice what it says. It says at the end there, they said thus to it, arise, devour much flesh. And I was wondering, who's the they? Well, it could be, back in verse 2, he says, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. The 4 winds could also be translated 4 angels. Winds, like ruach, like angelic, powerful beings. They were stirring up Gentile nations. And so maybe these angels were saying, arise, devour much flesh, to the Medo-Persian Empire. In other words, they're getting their cues, these angels are getting their cues from God, and they're telling this empire what to do. So we see here in this, I believe we're seeing, that God is still very much in control of what these nations are doing. He's telling them, you guys go out, you do this. I'm controlling this. I'm giving you the authority to go and to conquer and to devour much flesh. And Medo-Persia, as I said, became very big, huge. Let's look at the next beast, verse 6. After this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Okay, so what are leopards known for? Speed. Very, very fast. I think it's, 60 miles an hour they can go? It's incredible.
Yeah, I thought it was...
Even faster.
Yeah, I thought it was 70 something.
Yeah.
The fastest animal.
They're so fast. The fastest land animal or something?
Oh, yeah.
Incredibly fast, and they can just, turn very sharply and get their prey. This would speak of the Grecian Empire. And under Alexander the Great, Greece very, very rapidly conquered the Medo-Persian Empire, and they expanded their empire so quickly. They conquered all of that vast Medo-Persian Empire all the way to the borders of India within 14 years. And by the time Alexander the Great was 33 years old, he had conquered basically all the land that there was to conquer, in the ancient world. And at 33, he died depressed, drunken. He just thought, what's the point of going on? I've got no more lands to conquer. This guy was so amazing that he could just go very quickly and conquer lands. He was an incredible leader. It reminds me, though, of what Jesus said. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but forfeits his soul? Now here's Alexander the Great conquering the whole world. But was he a Christian? Was he a believer? And it doesn't really matter, does it, if you get the whole world and forfeit your soul? Now, it also says here that the beast also had 4 heads. Now, when Alexander the Great died, his kingdom was divided up to his top generals, 4 guys. And they went around and took various parts of that vast empire and ruled it for themselves. And so that would be the 4 heads upon this beast. And notice also, and dominion was given to it. Once again, we see God giving out, here, I'm going to give you this, Alexander the Great, I'm going to give you this dominion. I'm empowering you to go and to do these things. And now we get into the next thing. Verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. And it had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there, in this horn, were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. Okay. What would be the next kingdom in line after Greece? Rome. Rome was known for iron strength. It was powerful. You think of the Roman army being the most powerful military force ever assembled up to that time. Iron, strong. And it had this, here in this vision, this beast. And it doesn't say what kind of beast it was. Maybe it would be some kind of a mongrel, like a cross between a lot of different beasts all together. Maybe a bear, a leopard, and a lion all mixed together, But it had these huge chomping teeth. And it was smashing down everything and assimilating everything. And it was just dreadful and terrible, according to Daniel when he saw it. And it says it has 10 horns. Now, we're going to get into this a little bit, but the 10 horns of the Roman Empire speaks of a revival of the Roman Empire in the end of times. Now, the Roman Empire came after the Grecian Empire and finished up about 400 AD. And then it sort of disbanded, but there will be a revival of it. The Bible tells us this, under a person called the Antichrist. Now the Antichrist is going to come on the scenes at the end of time, and he is going to be a person who is empowered by Satan himself. The devil is going to inhabit him and empower him. And so under the Antichrist, this Roman Empire is going to be revived. And many Bible scholars believe that this will be a revival from Western Europe. And so it will be, because it has 10 horns, this speaks of powers. So they're thinking that these 10 horns would represent 10 governments or 10 localities or regions with 10 rulers. And so it has 10 horns, but notice in verse 8 it says, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. Now this little horn is the Antichrist. And what it tells us here is that it plucks out 3 of those rulers of the revived Roman Empire, almost overthrows them, 3 of those 10, and takes their place. And from that, then he starts to rule over everything else. It says that this little horn had eyes like the eyes of a man. And most scholars believe that this means he's a smart person. He has understanding. He has vision. He sees things. He has eyes like the eyes of a man. This Antichrist figure that's going to come on the scene, he's not going to be somebody that's just kind of dopey and dumb that nobody wants to follow. People nowadays, especially in places like Spain, Greece, Italy, where the economy is just terrible, They are looking for some strong person to come and rule and pull them out of this mess. And they're willing to give up their freedoms for somebody to rise up into a position of power and to help them out.
Bit like 1930s.
Yes, exactly. So when you're going in 1930 with a bucket of Deutschmarks or a wheelbarrow full of Deutschmarks to get a loaf of bread, you say, you know what? I'll follow a man like Adolf Hitler. I'll follow anybody. If I can get some pride back and if I can get some money back, I'll do that. And people sometimes are willing to sell their soul to these kind of leaders. Well, this guy, he is going to be incredible. He's going to speak well. He's going to be powerful. He's going to be dynamic. He's going to be smart. And people are going to say, that's the one. That's the one. We're willing to follow him. We're willing to give up our personal freedoms to follow this one. So he's going to have eyes like the eyes of a man. But notice also it says, and a mouth speaking pompous words. Okay. Now what I'd like to do is have you turn to the New Testament, because there is a chapter that parallels this very account in the New Testament. Almost word for word. Incredible. It's separated by, well, this was written in 530 BC. The book of Revelation was written in almost 90 AD. So think about it. That's a lot of time span between. And it's almost exactly word for word. So turn with me to Revelation chapter 13. So we're going to look at the Antichrist in this chapter. Look in Revelation 13. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and his authority. Now, who's the dragon? By the way, one of the things about the book of Revelation is it interprets itself. Sometimes when people read through it, they say, I can't understand any of this. But if you read in another part of the book of Revelation, it will actually give the explanation of these various symbols within the same book. So who's the dragon? Well, look back at verse 9 of chapter 12. So the dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan. So the dragon is giving the power, throne, and authority to this beast that rises up out of the sea. This is the Antichrist. This guy is not just demon-possessed. He is Satan-possessed. Satan himself is going to possess this one. Verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So apparently, there's going to be something that's going to happen to this Antichrist. And he's going to have some kind of a mortal wound that's going to be miraculously healed by Satan. Can Satan heal? Yes, according to this verse. He's healed. And then people say, wow, we're going to follow you. We see miracles performed. And so they worshipped the dragon and gave authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue 42 months. How long is that?
Not 3.5 years, is it?
It is 3.5 years.
It had to be.
3.5 years. Now this time comes up over and over again in the Bible. 3.5 years, 1,260 days, 42 months. It speaks of this period called the Great Tribulation, which is the last 3.5 years before Jesus Christ returns. This Antichrist is going to be, as we'll see in Daniel 9, a supposed friend of the nation of Israel. And he's going to make a peace treaty between Israel and their warring neighbors for 7 years. But in the middle, at the 3.5-year mark of that 7-year peace treaty, he's going to break the peace treaty. He's going to go into the temple of God in Jerusalem, and he's going to proclaim himself to be God and to be worshipped. And if you don't worship him, you're going to be put to death. And then he begins to persecute the Jews like never before. The Holocaust will seem trivial compared to what he's going to do to the Jewish people in the end times. And so it says here, he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. He's just cursing God. He's the big mouth, just like Satan. Verse 6, then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. So we get a picture here in the New Testament of the Antichrist and what he's going to do. Speaking great pompous words. Now let's look in verse 9, back in Daniel 7. It says, I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient of Days was seated. Now this is speaking of the Father here. God the Father. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool, and his throne was a fiery flame, its wheels of burning fire. By the way, don't get the idea that the Father has white hair and, hair like pure wool and stuff like that. This is symbolic language, because Jesus gave the only physical description of his Father. He said, God is spirit. Jesus has a body. The Father doesn't have a body. Okay, but this is speaking of his character, his nature. It speaks of purity and power and authority. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated and books were opened. Now this is speaking of a heavenly scene that Daniel sees now, of the judgment seat of God. And notice it says that it's a fiery judgment that's coming. The Bible tells us that our God is a consuming fire. Part of God's character is that he is a consuming fire. That means that he is going to destroy everything that is against him. All sin, rebellion, the flesh, that speaks of our old nature, anything that's done outside of the will of God, he's going to burn that up. So this fire is speaking of his judgment. Notice who is ministering to him. It says thousands. That's over 1 million. And I believe that these are angels here. 1 million angels all around the throne of God, ministering to God. Incredible, isn't it? And then it says 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, just in his presence. These might be angels, but they also might be people. And the court was seated and books were open. Now guess what's going to happen? I watched then, because of the sound of the pompous words which the horn was speaking. I watched till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As for the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Daniel was watching and he's thinking, I'm watching this Antichrist person pompously blaspheming God. What's going to happen to him? And he's just watching while God brings the judgment down on this guy. And it says his body was destroyed and he was burnt. God just says, that's it. All rebellion from you is gone. You're going to be destroyed. No more. You know, God, in the end, is going to either say to a person, my will be done, or your will be done. He's either going to say, it was in your life you did my will, or in your life you did your own will. And you're going to be judged for it. And so right here, the Antichrist, he is being judged for rebelling and pompously blaspheming our God. You know, all of us are made to serve God. We're made in the image of God. We're made to serve Him. We're made to love Him. We're made to have a relationship with Him. And anything outside of that is outside of His will. And so it's got to burn up. The only thing that's going to last is what's done for God in His will. But everything else, all sin, rebellion, blasphemy, it'll all go. Look at verse 13. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought Him near before Him. Then to Him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve Him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and His kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. This is speaking of Jesus, the Son of Man. By the way, the Son of Man is something that Jesus continually referred to about Himself. This is where He got that. It relates right back to this passage. 82 times in the Gospels that is mentioned, the Son of Man. Okay? Here He comes to the Ancient of Days, His Father, and is given a kingdom which never passes away. So we see a progression. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the revived empire under Antichrist, and then Jesus Christ comes back, and He establishes His kingdom forever. And when He comes back, this is what the Bible says. He's going to rule for 1,000 years in a time of perfect peace, no rebellion. And then after the 1,000 years, He is going to give the kingdom over to His Father, and the Father is going to make Him ruler over the eternal kingdom in heaven. Everything then is going to burn. Heaven and earth are going to pass away, and then we're going to have a new heaven and a new earth. The Bible tells us that in Revelation. So, when you think about that, think about this. If everything is going to burn that's outside of the will of God, then how should we live? It should affect the way that we live. Because we don't want to be just doing things that are just going to burn, or working for things that are just going to burn. We want to be about eternal things. Now, you know what you can do? You can do small things that have eternal value. You can change a nappy to the glory of God. You know, you can do what you do at the office, or what you do at the office, or whatever you're doing. You can do it all for the glory of God, and that has eternal value. But if you're only doing it for yourself, or for sin, or whatever, it's all going away. It's all going to burn. So we need to be thinking eternally. That's what God wants us to think like. You know, when we pray, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done, what we're really saying is, my kingdom has to go. My will, my plans, my desires. I want what You want in my life. I'm not just praying for, an expansion of Your kingdom for the here and now in the hearts of believers. I am praying for that. But I'm also praying for, Jesus, You come back, and You rule and reign, and You put down all rebellion. I'm praying for that. Thy kingdom come. Now let's just read through to the end of the chapter here. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit within my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near to the one who stood by, now I think this was an angel, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. Those great beasts which are four kings which arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever and ever. Then I wished to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with its feet. and the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, before which 3 fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth which spoke pompous words, whose appearance was greater than his fellows. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints, and prevailing against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and a judgment was made in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Well, then he said, the 4th beast shall be a 4th kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it in pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings, who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change the times and laws. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Time, 1 year. Times, 2 years. And half a time, half a year. 2 plus 1 is 3.5. 3.5 years. There it is again. 42 months. 1,260 days. But the court shall be seated, and they shall take away his dominion, and consume and destroy it forever. Then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. This is the end of the account. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts troubled me, and my countenance changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. Now, in that passage that we just read, 6 times he mentions the word saints. Now, a saint throughout the Bible is the people of God. Okay? In the Old Testament, you had Old Testament saints. In the New Testament, you've got New Testament saints. Now, a saint is not like the Roman Catholics teach, where they had to do some kind of a miracle and then be canonized by the Roman Catholic Church. That's not a saint according to the Bible. A saint is just the person of God. So, notice what happens with these saints, it says. Look in verse 22. Look in verse 21. I was watching, and the same horn was making war against the saints, and prevailing against them. And then in verse 25, in the middle there, it says, then the saints shall be given into his hands. So this little horn, this Antichrist, is persecuting the saints and prevailing against them. He's prevailing against the people of God. Now, we also read about that in Revelation, didn't we? In chapter 13, it says he's going to persecute them and he's going to kill them. Now, what's going on here? Well, these saints, I believe, are not Christians. Okay? These saints are what we will call the tribulation saints. Let me explain what I mean. They're not Christians because Jesus said this. In Matthew 16, verse 18, he said, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. The church, the bride of Christ, is not going to be prevailed upon by Satan. Satan is not going to defeat the church. So I do not believe that these saints are Christians. So who then are they? Well, I believe that they're the tribulation saints. And what I mean by that is, when Jesus Christ takes the church off the face of the earth, it's called the rapture of the church. There's a moment in time where Jesus will come back and take every living believer up to be with him. At that time starts the Great Tribulation period. 7 years of tribulation upon the earth. And during that time, the Antichrist will persecute those who believe in Jesus after the church is gone, because people will believe in him after the church has been raptured. They're going to have Bibles laying around and they're going to wonder what's gone on. And they're going to start getting saved. They're not part of the church, Because the church is the body of Christ taken up to be with Jesus, to the marriage supper of the Lamb. But they'll be saved in the same way that any other person's ever been saved, by faith in Jesus Christ. So, these tribulation saints will be persecuted by Antichrist. And you remember what we read back there in Revelation 13? If they don't worship him, he's going to kill them. If they don't worship Antichrist, they're going to be killed. So, very few believers during the tribulation will survive. So, we read these books like Tribulation Force, Left Behind, and we kind of get this maybe glamorous view of what it's going to be like, at the time, all these cool things happening, riding helicopters around and talking on mobile phones and stuff. Well, if you don't take the mark of the beast, you're up for slaughter. You have to be killed. He's going to prevail upon these people. So, it's going to be very, very difficult. But those who do make it to the end of the tribulation are the ones who enter into the 1,000-year reign of Christ and will repopulate the world. Okay? So where are the Christian saints? As soon as the rapture, sorry.
Say asleep.
Well, as soon as the rapture takes place, they go up to be with Jesus for the marriage supper of the Lamb for 7 years, and then they'll come back at the end of that 7-year period and rule and reign for 1,000 years with Jesus. Do you find that comforting at all? I find it very comforting as a Christian, knowing that I am not appointed to the Great Tribulation period. I find that extremely comforting. It tells us in 1 Thessalonians 5:9, "For God has not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ." See, as the bride of Christ, we are not going to go through the tribulation period. He's not going to take His bride through the tribulation to somehow punish her and cleanse her from sin. The tribulation is a period of time where He pours out wrath upon a Christ-rejecting world. And then at the end He's going to come back. So we are going to be raptured before that happens. So what that means is this, that in this lifetime, this is the worst on earth that it will ever get for us. Because for us, it's all up. Either by death we go to heaven, or by rapture we go to heaven. We're not ever going to go to hell. And we're not going to experience the great tribulation period on this earth. I find a great comfort because Paul tells us in 1 Thessalonians, he says, "Comfort one another with these words." This is a tremendous comfort.